Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Cara.
This episode is about messing up. Okay. It's not a personal episode, but
it will be.
There's that time where I messed up and missed my kids' pneumonia, even though I listened to them with a stethoscope. There's that time when I taught my kids sex ed, and I was like, it's no big deal, when it was really a big deal to them. Like,
they still
really
talk about it.
I mean, yes, not in the warm, fuzzy, hilarious way I would have imagined that they would have talked about it. There are so many moments that I flash back to where I severely messed up, making the wrong comment, being a little shaming, being a bit judgmental, being thoughtless. And I do this for a living. I don't do those things for a living, but I do this for a living. And you would think there would be some insulation, but you take your doctor / podcaster / I hate the term parenting expert, but you take your parenting expert hat off. And at the end of the day, you're the parent or the trusted adult, right? And when you're in that role, you will mess up a lot.
You are human, is what you are, is what we all are.
We all are. And so you and I, when we travel around the country, we talk a lot about giving ourselves permission to mess up, giving ourselves grace, and taking a do-over. And we need to talk about it on this episode because there are so many ways in which we can actually do those things. And frankly, taking the do-over, acknowledging that we screwed it up and taking the do-over, which a lot of therapists and psychiatrists call repair, right? That's not just massively important. It's actually, that's the part of the interaction they remember, right? I mean, I'm not saying you should mess up in order to repair, but I am saying there is a huge body of data that shows that the repair allows the relationship to progress forward. So we're going to talk about this in the context of puberty because there are so many different ways that as a kid's body and brain are changing that we can really mess up what we say and how we say it. And it's time to do a little of that work so that we can all get over ourselves and parent better or adult better through it.
So let's start. I think we should go through a few different scenarios for messing up and age.
That don't involve me, please.
No, I'll carry the mantle from here, Cara, because I have an excellent example of all of them. But different ages. So we could start with sort of an elementary school age mess up on one topic and a middle school age mess up on another topic and a high school / college age on another topic. And I think that will give people framing for ways to manage it all. What psychologists will say, so the underpinning that Cara is referring to about the importance of repair is that you want a relationship, you want the connection in a relationship to be stretched, but not broken. But you want the flexibility of stretching because by stretching, we find our learning edge, right? We see what we're capable of. Our kids see what they're capable of managing, the discomfort, the disappointment, the anger, all of the things that come around mess ups. And when we mess up and we come back, so the act of repair actually builds trust and connection with the other person in our life. So that could be a kid, it could be a partner, it could be a friend. What it's like, and we've talked about in other podcasts, and now of course I can't remember what it's called, so I'm going to furiously Google it, is it's like the Japanese pottery that is broken and then repaired with gold. It's called kintsugi, which I think I'm probably mispronouncing. So I'm going to ask listeners who have the correct pronunciation to share that with me. But essentially, it's making a piece of pottery that's been broken even more beautiful by repairing it with gold. And so the framing that we want to offer you is not the framing that is it's broken and I'm haphazardly gluing something back together, but it looks like crap and no one's ever going to want to use it. And it's going to be hidden in the back of the deepest recesses of the highest shelf, never to be seen again until you like move in 20 years. I want you to think of messing up and the result of taking the do-over when you mess up as actually a beautiful piece of art that will be proudly displayed on the glass front cabinet, visible to all because it is so wonderful.
I love that. Also, I think we have to acknowledge and celebrate the fact that, Vanessa, when you and I were growing up, there was a striving for perfection, a desire to Martha Stewart through everything and have everything look beautifully and seem perfect and seamless and easy. And yes, we live in a world of social media where the Instagram of it all may value that. However, I don't think there's anyone who would argue with the statement that we also live in a world where messy is celebrated, right? Who are the most famous, beloved characters in the world right now? They are often either people who are having a comeback because everyone loves a comeback, or they're people who share all their dirty laundry and they look imperfect and they're not. So there's this thing that has happened generationally between when we were growing up and when we are helping to raise kids today, which allows for exactly what you're talking about, allows us to see the beauty of repair because it doesn't all have to look perfect. And that is such a relief. And if you don't feel that, my first piece of advice is go look for that. Go look for examples around you in the world of celebration of imperfection, and it'll change your frame. It'll change the way you see this concept of messing up to make it less oppressive and more forgiving.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a culture shift, at least superficially, that says mistakes are good and you learn from making mistakes.
I don't think it's superficial. I think it's real.
I think for some people it's real. And I think for some people, we speak out of both sides of our mouth. And on the one hand, we claim that mistakes are good. And on the other hand, we come down so hard on our kids for messing up. We come down so hard on our partners for being imperfect. And because, Cara, I think people don't feel, and I include myself in this until, over the last decade, it's something I've really learned how to do because I teach other people how to do it, right? And you learn most often by teaching, or those who can't teach. And therefore I couldn't do it. And then I taught it and then I learned how to do it. So not the derogatory way people use that phrase. But the point is, we can't just say it. We can't just say, oh, it's okay, or you get to do mistakes, but we have to embody what you were just talking about, which is let's change the culture, because all of the research tells us fessing up, admitting our mistakes, taking the do-over, repairing, whatever you want to call it, makes our relationships stronger. And so the question is, how do we do it? Because so often these kinds of things happen in a maelstrom of high emotions and stress and the chaos of life. And you talked, Cara, about the messiness, and messiness can be beautiful, but can also be overwhelming. Yes, it can be overwhelming. It can be confusing. It can be opaque. It can be gray area. And so our job is to help sort of clear away the brush and help find some different paths through messing up. And it is something actually, and it's so funny because Bear talked about this on the podcast that we recorded with Bear and Rye. If you haven't listened to this, our 2-second kids recorded a podcast episode with us about kind of what it means to be second kids and have us as their parents. And it meant so much to me because Bear said the thing that I've gotten so much better at is actually admitting when I've made a mistake and coming back. And that was like the best thing he could ever say because it's something I've worked so hard at getting better at. So let's start.
Let's start with kindergarten.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to start in kindergarten because
are we doing shoe tying? Are we doing kindergarten?
No, that was
shoe
when
tying?
I missed the pneumonia. in one of my kids. And I want to use it as an example of it's relatable in this sense. If you're wearing the parent hat and there's something that you feel like you're supposed to know, and then you do the thing and you're very confident and like, nope, you don't have to worry about this and you can do this. And then it turns out you're wrong. So pneumonia is, just giving a little backstory here. Pneumonia is, you can hear it. You can hear like a crackling or a crunching in the lungs. You're hearing all the inflammatory cells kind of rub up against each other in the lungs when you listen for pneumonia. But sometimes in the very, very beginning of pneumonia, you don't hear the crackling. You just don't hear very much at all. And so here I'm listening to my 6-year-old and she's coughing, coughing, coughing. And, she's taking nice deep breaths for me. And I listen to kids' breaths all the time with my stethoscope. And I'm listening. I'm like, you're fine. You can go to school. And 48 hours later, when she's worse and worse and worse, and I take her in to see one of my partners to be a real doctor, my partner listens and says, oh, you have a pneumonia. And my 6-year-old looks at me and says, you missed it. You were wrong. And I felt very shamed. Now, intellectually, Vanessa, I knew 48 hours earlier, A, it was 6-year-old, and B, 48 hours earlier, there wasn't a pneumonia there. But we are now 15 years later. And this example continues to be the lead go-to example that she uses when you don't know everything, you even missed my pneumonia. And it's
been trotted out in front of me. I will attest to that. Yes.
And I want to just yell and scream and say, you did not have a pneumonia when I listened to you 48 hours before you were diagnosed with it, but that actually doesn't help the situation. And my mess up was actually trying to be the doctor and the parent. And that's a fair criticism. Anytime we mess up with little kids in a way that makes them question our knowledge, it feels acutely uncomfortable because they suddenly don't think of us as the person they can go to who knows it all. And that undermines one of the most important roles we play, which is, I'm the person who's going to tell you how it is so that you can stay safe and healthy. And I think that's why this example has remained such a live wire in my house, both for my kids and for me. I still feel embarrassed all these years later because I feel like my kids walked around and thought, well, either she doesn't really know as much as she says she knows. Therefore, fill in the blank. She doesn't know anything about any of the things she's saying to me, or she got this one wrong with me. What else is she going to get wrong with me? So at the very base level, kindergarten, first, second grade, like that's what we're talking about with the do-over. It's like, it's not really the details of it that matter. It's this sense we have that foundationally, we think they don't trust us as a source anymore.
So, Cara, I want to unpack this a little bit because essentially what happens is we move in our kids' minds from being omniscient to being fallible. And
very quickly.
And then over a long process, they begin to test the bounds of what our knowledge base is and isn't, and where we're sort of more likely or liable to make mistakes. And they will hold us accountable on different layers or to different extents, depending on what they perceive our expertise to be, right? So like you were particularly upset or challenged by what happened because it wasn't just you as a parent who had, theoretically messed up. Although frankly, I would say you didn't. It just hadn't appeared yet as pneumonia. But you were both challenged as a doctor and a parent because you were wearing two hats. And so I think one thing to point out to people is anyone wearing two hats in a situation with a kid, right? Let's say you're a teacher and your kid has a problem, a math problem, and you're a math teacher and you give them the wrong answer or you give them the wrong advice, or you are in business and you're looking at a resume and giving them advice, right? Anytime we're wearing both our hats, the burden is that much heavier, I think. And in your case, it was truly about your kid's health and safety. It was not like, can I have ice cream or can I go to the sleepover? It was like really about her health. And so that feels particularly fraught. Around the same age that Talia was when you made this human and understandable error, I was coaching my daughter soccer. She was 6. And I knew that she was physically a great athlete. But when I tell you this child stepped onto the 3v3 soccer field and could not care less about what was happening in the game, and all she wanted to do was chat and dance and socialize. And here I was, I had spent a year researching girls in sports. I had founded a girls' sports company. I was coaching girls the exact same age in sports, giving people all sorts of advice about how to engage girls in sports. And what did I do? I bribed my child with frozen yogurt toppings so that with each goal she scored on the field, remember, this is a 6-year-old, this is 3v3 soccer, with each goal she scored, she would get another topping on her frozen yogurt. It was the epitome of inane hypocrisy, what I did. And I did it anyways. And you know what? It had no impact. She could care less. She still twirled on the field. She still chatted with her opponents. She didn't care. She didn't want the toppings. And I should have known that because I knew in my professional hat, it wasn't going to work. And still, I did it. And now what do? We laugh about it. And she trots it out once a year and we laugh about it. So for those of you carrying your professional and your personal, you're going to mess it up. For those of you who know better and still do it, okay. It's an opportunity to laugh about it. It's an opportunity to show kids your fallibility. Great. Like, these are all super important. I clearly carry less of this with me than Cara does. Cara's still holding on to it.
I really am. You know what I thought you were going to say about 2 hats?
What?
I thought you were going to make some analogy to how wearing 2 hats never works, sort of like using 2 condoms is a really bad idea. So,
or two pairs of glasses at the same time.
Correct. Like,
yes,
there is such a thing.
That's so funny that you went there. There's too much of a good thing.
It's too much of a good thing. So for the examples of the younger, I do think some of it is this 2 hats. And I think even if you're not trained in healthcare, you still, when they are that young and you are so much older and you do something that from a health, safety, or emotional standpoint feels like I was the juvenile in this situation, that feels very vulnerable, very embarrassing.
Or to those parents, one of us on the podcast might have done this, said, it's fine. It's not that bad. You're fine. Go back out and play. And it turned out, I don't know, your kid had a broken arm, for example.
Two of us on this podcast might have done that. 2 for 2.
So for those of us who dismissed, you're not that sick. This is another one my kids bring out. I told them they weren't that sick. It turned out they had strep throat, right? Like, we are all human. We have all done it. We are all doing the best we can. Our kids remember it. It humanizes us to them, which is awesome. The trick is, as they get older and the opportunities for mistake making becomes more multifaceted, the stakes get higher, they're more mature in some ways and still quite immature in other ways. So their reactions start to evolve. And then you put hormones in the mix for them and for us. So there's mood swings, right? It becomes a bubbling cauldron of messing up opportunities.
Right. And sometimes the mess ups are physical safety mess ups, and those happen. That's a through line in life. And the more independent they get, the harder it is to actually have a semblance of control over that, because you really don't. Some of it, much of it, shifts to the emotional mess up realm.
Right.
And, I'm thinking about the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th graders, right, who are swinging into peak mood swings. Their hormones are hitting high highs and then low lows. And this is happening, a couple of times a day. And they hate how it feels. And you don't recognize them emotionally anymore. And they're also exhausting and annoying sometimes. And you've got a million and one things to do, maybe work, maybe other kids, maybe other family who needs you, maybe friends, maybe you just need a break because you're human. And then you do or say something that is reactive in the moment. And it's usually the setup at this point. It's like just the straw that broke the camel's back. And one little thing happens and it just tips you over. And you say something that, as the words are coming out of your mouth, not only do you know these words can't come out of my mouth, but also, this is going to be one of those moments that they clock and lock, and they're never going to let go of this. And in therapy, when they're 40, this is the comment that's coming back.
Okay, I have a good story for this. So I'm going to give you some background, which is to say, when I was a kid, grade school, middle school, and high school. And I'm one of four. I'm the third of four. So when I was in grade school, there were kids younger than me and kids in high school in my family. Every Monday night, my mother would at some point get up from the table and leave us because she was so infuriated by our behavior. So fast forward, I stupidly shared this with my own children, and somehow, I don't know, genetics or destiny. And most Monday nights in my house, if my family is together having dinner, things just fall apart and it's like a total shit show. So one of those Monday nights, I, as many of us do, finished a work day, threw together a slapdash meal as best as I could, and like delivered it onto the table with my kids who, had straggled in. Yeah. I mean, literally like a frisbee onto the table. And my daughter looked at, I don't know, I must have chopped up some avocado to put on something. And she looked at the avocado and she was like clearly exhausted. She had like circles under her eyes. Her ponytail was like half off her head. She was in muddy sports clothes. And she looked at me and she's like, "This avocado is disgusting. It's all brown."
Oh,
And
buckle your seatbelts.
I looked at her and I was like, anyone listening to this, you can just feel the rage bubbling up inside of me, right? You can all viscerally feel the hair stand up on the back of your neck, the sweat in your pits, your heart begin to race, like all of the stress and adrenaline, the cortisol just coursing through me. And I looked at her and I was like, "You spoiled little brat. How dare you speak to me like that? You are going to eat that avocado. There are people who would clamor to have a bite of that avocado. I don't care if it's brown," right? I just went completely apoplectic. And she looked at me and she said, "You say that you want to raise an empowered daughter. And yet, when I speak up for myself, you shame me into being silent and accepting a fate that I do not want to have." And I was like, and the needle just like fell off the record. And I stopped and I looked at her and I was like, "Oh my God, you are so right. I am so sorry. Your tone was not a great tone and it set me off. I've worked really hard. I'm stressed about this. I'm worried about that. And I am so sorry. And it came out on you and it shouldn't have. And you're right. And I apologize. And can I take a do-over?" And my youngest, who was sitting between the two of us, looked at me and he goes, "God, Mom, that was like the fastest do-over you've ever taken." And it was amazing. It was amazing because she called me on my shit. He recognized I took a do-over. I, in the moment, was able to pull back from my absolute rage and apologize in the moment, which doesn't always happen. It was like the perfect little messing up microcosm.
I mean, my biggest mess up, I don't know if it's my biggest, the one that comes to the front of my mind is the one that I alluded to at the top, which is about teaching sex ed to my kids. I did it very intentionally. Like, first of all, I was the person who was always brought into their school and I wasn't going to not do it for my own kids. But I also felt like I was a known entity. I knew me. And I felt like I could do it better. And I thought they were the beneficiaries of something actually really special that we would kind of bond about over time. And
or not.
or not. And the thing is that my daughter, who's older, who was the first one to go through this, tried to tell me in 115 different ways that this was not going to work for her. And unlike you, who recovered in that instance, I didn't. I was like, you're good. You know, when they're toddlers and you say, you're good, get up, you're good. And it's
Right.
like, that's really bad. That style of parenting is very, very out of fashion, let us say. And that's what I was doing, the emotional equivalent of that. And she was
Right.
telling me in every way, including when I actually got to the top front of the classroom and she crawled under her desk and she was like, I can't.
She's like, you
And
can't hear me verbally, so I'm
so
actually
I
going to
will show
physically
you.
demonstrate to you how much I don't like
Yes.
this. Right.
And it was a mess. I mean, do I regret it in hindsight? I'm going to say on this one, no, because I do think given the other choices, she got better health and sex education than she would have gotten given the options there. And it was worth it to me.
But would you have explained it differently? Like, would you have framed it differently for her?
This is what I want to talk about. I am slightly obsessed, as you know, with explaining why.
Yes.
And I don't believe that this is an apology. I believe it's a framing and a helping them to understand the rationale for something. It's also a way into a conversation that allows you to hear why not, which is a very important thing to be able to hear. I wish I had done that. Instead of being like, you're good, I'm going to do this. I wish I had said, here's why I'm going to do this. Here are the other options on the table. None of them feel good to me. I've been doing this for a really long time. Let's be in conversation about how this can go best. I didn't do that. Here's the reason we're doing this episode. When we mess up, we learn. And the bigger our mess up, the bigger our learning curve. And if we don't learn, it's a missed opportunity. So I actually think I started parenting fundamentally differently after that day because it became so clear to me that I had not explained the rationale and I had just bullied through the situation and said, it's my way or the highway. And no, you cannot be excused from class, done and done.
Mm-hmm.
And look, that works some of the time in certain extreme circumstances, but we're also telling ourselves a real story, a real fantasy, if we think that that's the most effective way to get kids through a situation where we are actively messing up. I think it requires, like, I had to pull the mirror out and look in the mirror and understand what was going on and then say, ooh, I better pivot my behavior. And this is why firstborns are the first pancake and secondborns, we do things so differently and often so much better.
So, Cara, I think I do feel like my subsequent children after my first benefit from lessons I've learned with my oldest. And I tell the story in the book, and I'm going to use this example to get at how we talk to kids about sex and other complicated topics, fraught topics. So not in response to a mood swing, ours or theirs, but more a mess up in response to answering a complicated or hard question. So for those of you who have read This Is So Awkward, you will remember this story, which is my oldest was reading the newspaper. And in those days, we still got a paper.
There was this
thing called a newspaper.
That's how old your oldest is.
Reading the sports section. In those days, also the sports section was had its own section, which it now no longer does. It's at the end of the business section. And there was a story about an athlete who had raped a woman. And he said, Mom, what's rape? And on the time that he asked me the question, it was a Sunday morning. I was parenting on my own. I had somebody needed breakfast and somebody needed their butt wiped and somebody needed to get to a soccer game. And I was frantic and, throwing food on the table. Yet again, there's a theme here. And I didn't think about the question. And I just said, oh, well, rape is when a man forces a woman to have sex. And that was it. Several hours later in the car, it dawned on me how badly I had blown my answer to my kid, like on any number of levels. And I realized I didn't know if he knew what the word sex meant, and I had assumed he knew. Turns out he didn't know. I realized I had defined rape incorrectly and in a non inclusive way. So the first realization came driving, and I said, "Hey, do you know what sex is?" And he said, "No, not really." So we went to talk about sex. And then we parked the car, we're getting out of the car, and he said, "So, mom, can a woman rape a man?" Which made me realize I had blown my definition of rape. And I realized, thanks to his question, oh, yes, anyone can rape anyone, irrespective of gender. And so we had like a long conversation where he literally taught me all the ways I had messed up by asking the normal questions that kids ask. And I slowly but surely dug myself out of my mess up with him as my guidepost about how to take the do over. And the best part about it, there's nothing good about rape, but the best part about it was it gave me a model, it gave me a paradigm, and it gave me an open door to have many, many, many more conversations with my kid about really tricky topics related to sex, not related to sex, that came from that one huge mess up.
Right. And I think so much of the conversation as kids get older, and now as we move from middle school age up to high school and college age, is exactly that, that we need to be in deeper and more detailed conversations with kids over time. And these conversations come from mess ups. They also provide us ample opportunity to keep messing up more. So I'm thinking about everything from parents whose kids want to try on different pronouns, and the parents will reach out to us and say, "I'm trying to be respectful. I can't keep it straight. I keep messing up." And that feels to the parent and to the kid sometimes like a major violation, right? How do you recover from that? I'm thinking about parents who put all sorts of downward pressure on their kids for either academic or athletic achievement in order to make their life better. People are not trying to make their kids miserable. What they're trying to do is give their kid the best shot at the next step in life, which should set them up for fill in the blank, job, happiness, you name it. Of course, when I say these words, we all know the fallacy of that. We know that that is not the way to achieve happiness and success in life, however you measure that, is not by piling on all of these huge expectations onto a high schooler or a young college student or a college aged kid. But we do it, and we do it all the time. We're socialized to do it. The world is set up in such a way that how can we not do it? Like, when it comes to kids in high school looking beyond high school and thinking about going to college, it feels wrong to be the parent who's like, "I'm blissfully ignorant and I'm just going to put my head in the sand and let my child do this whole thing themselves." And there's like a industrial complex built around this process to get to the next step in education. And so oftentimes we buy into things, tropes, scenarios that are predictably going to trap us in quicksand. And when we do that, we mess up because we are trying to balance two sets of interests. We're trying to balance their future, happiness, health, safety, whatever, with their present. And I don't know, Vanessa, I can't think of an example where it's easy to strike the middle ground between balancing what you're looking forward to on their behalf or trying to help them look forward to and living in the moment today in a way that feels comfortable and easy and like, I got this. This is hard. And we mess up all the freaking time. We do. And asking our kids to give us a chance to do it differently or say it differently is critical. It's critical.
Yeah, I mean, add on top of that and we talk about this all the time in our keynote, which is that we bring our own adolescent baggage into this. So our memories from, grade school are kind of fuzzy. Our memories about what happened yesterday are very fuzzy. The memories that we have from the tween and teen and college years are seared into our brains. And there's like really good neurological reasons for that. It's not just you or you, it's all of us. It is seared into our brains. And hopefully not because of trauma, but because when our brains are under construction at that time, things get into the grooves of our memory in a way that they don't at other times. And the temptation is to bring that into the conversation with kids. It's to bring that into the expectations, into the punishments, into the reactions. And so often when we mess up, it's because we are asking our kids to carry our baggage alongside their baggage. And it's actually one of the easiest things, I think, to acknowledge with a kid is to say, you know what? I was looking at it from the POV of what high school was like when I was your age, or what calculus was like when I was your age, or what parties were like when I was your age. And I realized I don't actually know what it's like. Can you explain it to me? I made all these assumptions. I messed up. Can you set me straight? And doing that does two things. It both, as you said, Cara, gives our kids permission and opportunity to guide us and give us language and give us opportunities. It gives them the chance to be the expert, which they love. And it names for them what they are witnessing and trying to make sense of. So part of what we're doing is we're narrating our mess up so that they have that data, they have that information. So the next time it happens, they can say, hey, you know what, Mom? That was your high school experience, not my high school experience. Can you listen to me? Because I'm trying to explain something to you and you're bringing your high school stuff into this. Then we've just created a shortcut, right? So the mess up and the do-over has a hack, it has a shortcut, and we get to the next part of the conversation even faster.
Right. Because what you're describing is all the reason behind the language. You just don't understand. You don't understand. We don't understand. We are not, even if life looked exactly the same, which it doesn't, even if they were still talking on corded phones, and even if there was no climate change, and even, right? Even then, we're not walking through life in their shoes.
Right.
And we want to understand. I think that's where the tension sits at the end of the day. We want so badly to understand so we can be helpful. And really, the most helpful we can be is to listen and to learn and to stop being so solution oriented and start just empathizing. And when they want a solution, having some options available or knowing the right person to ask. But, when I go through my catalog of mess ups, most of the time, Vanessa, they track to exactly what you're describing. I mean, not the pneumonia, but everything else tracks
Right.
to exactly what you're describing.
Yeah. And I think for people listening, we all have our catalog and we all have our litany. And we're gonna blow it again and again. And that's all fine. It has to be fine because the job doesn't end, right? Parenting never ends. The uncertainty never ends. Our kids are like, my mom always says, kids are like the best novel you'll ever get to read. And you don't know how it's going to turn out. And it keeps going and you keep reading and there's new and wonderful surprises. And, as we always say, they're works in progress. But you know what? We're also works in progress. And we are evolving and changing and hopefully getting better at this job of caring for them and parenting them. But also, I truly believe, Cara, I am a better person for having done this job, the job of raising my kids, and coaching other people's kids and educating other people's kids. I'm a better person. And I really believe I'm a better person in large part because of the ways I've messed up and I've learned from it. And my husband will tell you that I am actually a better spouse because of how I've learned through my mess ups with my kids. I am a better partner in life through those mess ups. So, I mean, anyone listening could name 5 things they did this week. And you should, when we go and speak to audience with a full auditorium and we say to them, how many of you screamed in your kid's face this week? The hands just shoot up,
And when they don't, Vanessa's like, come on, be honest. And then the hands go up.
They all go up. So I know Cara usually plays the role of like glasses half full, but there's nothing I believe in more than the power of messing up. Truly.
You've learned your lesson that the glasses half full is the right analogy.
I mean, I think the
you
glasses
messed that
half
one
full.
Up for a while.
I think the glasses half full like 10% of the time.
I thought you were going to say the glass is 10% full.
Yeah, and the rest of the time it's half empty. But I really, really, really believe in this. And the people always say to us, well, aren't I going to lose authority with my kids if I admit to making a mistake? And here's the analogy I use when we speak to people, because I think it is so powerful. And when you think about the shame of having made a mistake and you imagine yourself like you're sitting at the bottom of a well and you are trapped at the bottom of the well and the shame is just keeping you down there. And when we get to move on from a mess up, when we get to take a do-over, when someone offers us a chance to try it again, it's like they're throwing a ladder down to us. And we are given the chance to climb out of that well of shame, of remorse, whatever it is. And if you can think of taking a do-over and admitting your mistake as handing your kid a ladder and letting them know there is always a way out of that well, it is the greatest gift, I think. It is the greatest gift you can give to your family.
And at some point, when they are grown up, they will throw you the ladder.
That's right.
And then you're like, mic drop. My job is done.
That's right.
We're good.
That's right. Thank you, Cara.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Thank you so much for listening. You can email us with questions, feedback, or episode requests at podcast@lessawkward.com.
If you want to learn more about what we do to make this whole stage of life less awkward for everyone involved, our parent membership, our school health ed curriculum, our keynote talks, and more are all at lessawkward.com.
And if you want products that make puberty so much more comfortable, visit myumla.com.